Today on Above the Tree Line, I have David Allen. This is his second appearance on Above the Tree Line. So, Dave, glad to have you back on. We wanted to talk about this research work that you've done at Cumulo 9, and there was some really fascinating stuff there about email.
Yeah, we've had two pieces of research. We had a consultancy came in and talked to 8 large enterprise clients, essential email. So we define where we play in the essential email space. And we see that, and the research helped us to clarify that there's quite a big distinction between essential and campaign email. In addition to that, we've also just generated out the 5th edition of our email insights report. So that's scooping up all of the data. So we send out many millions of emails every month on behalf of large enterprise transactional clients. And so we're able to analyze that data and to establish trends. And having 5 years of data has now made that really useful. We also spend a lot of time talking to the ESPs or the inbox service providers. And so we've got good insights from them as well. Out of that particular report, what we were able to do is identify 3 significant trends. The first trend that we identified was this ongoing and growing focus on security. All of these protocols now required to get emails through ecosystem and to validate trusted senders. And so that's become a really big piece of, a really important aspect to email sending. That we're able to identify from that data was that there's been a large decline in mobile device usage, which actually really surprised us. But when we looked into it, so it's a drop, 69% of opens on mobile devices to 64%. We think that trend will continue. And we think that trend has resulted from people going back into their offices from working from home. That's a post-COVID trend. The other interesting thing, being able to look at open rates themselves and compare that with campaign platforms and using data that's publicly available from the large campaign players, which is generally averaging for campaign mail at about 35% open rates. And so the open rates on our platform for these essential communications has been around consistent 70%. And last year was 69% open rate for essential email, which is really high. And then the third major trend that we identified was the ongoing or growing focus on security. And a lot of that's from working with the ISPs or the ESPs, the inbox providers.
Right.
Email is about 50% of inboxes in New Zealand, and we've got Yahoo, Microsoft, and a bunch of other providers that are more local providers that are the balance of that. But certainly Google's about 50%. So this is SPM, DKIM, DAMARC, TLS. All of these various protocols or security protocols have now been introduced and are being enforced by the inbox providers. So we've been educating our clients around setting up and establishing those protocols. And that's really helped with deliverability.
Mm-hmm.
And so one needs to set up these protocols in advance. And then equally, as I said, encrypting and managing the emails through to the ISPs or the inbox service providers who then ultimately deliver them to inboxes. Mm-hmm. That was the piece of research from our own data collection from the millions that we send out. But then there was this other interesting research. I shared that copy of that report with you, which is available around deeper interviews. And this was on-site interviews with these large essential, there were billers, so there was a local authority, central government, utilities, telcos, large banks, large enterprises, sending enterprises. I'm talking to them about their experience in moving from obviously postal mail to email. And there was really interesting insights that spun out of that research. The main one, I suppose, the main insight was that there was this dash to exit physical mail and not a lot of thought going into deliverability. And what we're observing is that whilst they're all celebrating, and in New Zealand we've got about 80% substitution now to email from physical mail. So celebrating the fact that they moved the customers across to email, but actually not understanding that the postal service is really good at delivering mail. And if you're using a campaign system for delivering essential communications, then the deliverability rates, they can be as low as 85%. I think at the higher end, they're about 95%. So that's a lot of emails that don't get through. These large organizations are just starting to think about the consequences of these non-delivered emails. So that was one thing. There was also, again, a growing focus on compliancy. So again, in banking and to a certain extent in utilities, where we've got a large take-up of direct debits, the receivers are not really as focused now on receiving the document as they were before. But there are pockets of customer communication that are hugely critical in terms of those communications having to get through. It might be a disconnection letter, for instance. So we had a case in New Zealand where a customer of a power company's power got turned off, and they were on oxygen, and actually they died. And so that was a huge wake-up call for the industry around the importance of getting notices and having communications going through to customers at those times of stress where there's potential disconnection or non-payment, and how one deals with that. Yeah, there are a whole lot of other pockets of communications that organizations are saying these are now critical and they must get through. And we must, in Australia, for instance, now the courts are demanding the deep sending logs in the court. So proving, for instance, if you were an insurer, that renewal notice actually got delivered, because there have been instances where there have been claims lodged that have been rejected as a consequence of non-paid premiums, but actually the renewal notice never got through. It's a high focus area for ourselves who have built a transactional email platform, and we actually guarantee 99% deliverability, and we've got an audited deliverability rate of 99.5. And being able to track these essential emails, we believe, is hugely important. Coming back to that point I made about the postal service actually was really reliable, and the mail got through. Floods, storms, earthquakes, whatever, they tended to deliver. The Pony Express story out of the US, they delivered the mail. But in our market, we don't even talk about mail anymore. Or the senders, the enterprise senders, they've all moved on completely. And that's a conversation. The 10 or 15, 20% at max of those customers still receiving mail, they tend to be a demographic group that are not going to shift. And so the billers or the large senders have just accepted there will always be a pocket that will receive mail. But everyone else has been incented out or are now having to pay up to $5 a physical document to receive them via the postal service.
I've always maintained that I believe it's possible to 90% or more digital adoption. I believe that's possible.
And we are in that. A lot of our billers are in that 90%. And we don't have double dippers. They've worked really hard to ensure that doesn't happen. So it's one channel or the other channel. That's not the two.
I actually posted something on that very topic today. And it's a big problem. It's a big problem in the United States because we have a large group of people that are getting both that are saying, I throw the print away. It shows up, I look at it, and it's in garbage.
One interesting trend, though, of the substitution of physical mail is that a lot of these communications have now been turned off. Just back to some numbers, early 2000s, New Zealand Post sent out 1,000 million items of mail, and it's 150 million today. But actually, when you look at, has all that substituted to email? It hasn't. So the banks, for instance, now it's about internet banking, and you don't get your statement sent. It's basically you're encouraged to, or in fact, you have to go onto internet banking sites to receive your statements.
They still send you a notice, though, right? They still send you a text and say it's there, right?
Don't.
That's interesting, because a lot of times you'll talk to people and they'll say, as we do this substitution from print and mail to digital, there's this explosion. It's not a 1-to-1, it's like a 1 to 25. But what you're saying is it's a 1 to
No. So they
number.
do. They have to with credit cards. So with credit cards, because it's a bill, it's a debt, so they have to. But all the other notices, like the current accounts and savings accounts, and there's no, you have to go onto the portals. Now, there are a small demographic, again, who would still receive physical mail, but virtually all of the other customers and the rates, if you've got home loans, they are all a different rate if you've got a digital relationship with them or digital only relationship with them. Yeah, a lot of communications have been turned off. The large government entities it's all their portals. So our tax office now, it's you go on to their portal, have a log on. Same with our social welfare. So the other interesting trend, which is, it's a bit sad in many ways, because I've come up through a direct marketing. Direct mail has virtually died in New Zealand. And that's all about graduates and people coming through who are digital first and actually don't understand direct mail and they just find it too hard.
That's a really interesting observation, because there's a lot of people in the direct mail industry in the United States who would say the exact opposite. That it's something tangible and it's emotional and the memory tension and it sits on the counter and all of those glorious things about printed mail.
It's true. In our market, the odd piece of direct mail gets through. It tends to have great cut through because it's so unique.
Yeah,
and so,
probably very expensive, I would expect too.
Yeah, its processes are much more mechanical. So a lot more touch points, whereas the digital campaigns tend to be automated and connected up to campaign automation platforms. But the other thing is that loyalty programs in New Zealand have died. They've just run their course.
Really?
And
Points and miles and all of that stuff, right?
Yeah, and so we've had some massive loyalty campaigns that are based around consolidated merchants, typically at service stations and retail stores, so at supermarkets. Right. Those programs have just run out of steam. And the largest single one in New Zealand, where 50% of all New Zealanders had signed up to, was called Flybys. And it was linked to telco, banking, insurance, retail. They shut up. They just absolutely turned the whole program off, but that program has died. Wow. So with it, all of that physical mail based died with it.
So what is the impact of AI? And we got to talk about AI because everybody talks about AI, but it's an interesting conversation. So I believe you were part of it. I posted something about appearing in London. I'm speaking at Mailmetrics and talking about how Mailmetrics represents the future of print service or communication service providers. And somebody brought up the topic of physical addresses having value. And then somebody else jumped in and started talking about email and digital. And all of a sudden the conversation went from talking about print versus digital to which is more valuable, a physical mailing address or a digital address, an email or mobile number. And it was a fascinating thread to see how this conversation just flipped.
2 large customer events last week. And over with large groups of people at the table talking, and within 15 minutes, the whole conversation had become AI. It was all about AI. There are some use cases that are absolutely AI ready, just superb. And if we look at CCM and we say, where's AI and CCM? Yes, there are use cases. There's a classic one at the moment that we're involved in around sentiment analysis. So you create content and you run an AI across it. And that's now the likes of Quadient, who we represent, they're doing that now successfully. The interesting thing is that, so this is built inside of your CCM, but it requires external connectivity off to the AI.
It's going to touch everything. Everything. It's digitized. Anything you can get its hands on, it is going to touch and digitize.
Correct. Yeah. And so digital humans, there's big growth now, and you can see what's happening in contact centers. But underneath that, listening to large organizations talking about becoming AI ready, there's a large investment in the back office to clean data, to simplify processes. So the world of the CDP, customer data platform, that's really getting traction now as these businesses start to realize that in order to deploy AI inside their business, they actually have to do some housekeeping first. And they are quite big investments they don't happen overnight.
Right. But now they're turning their attention to the CCM folks going, hey, you know a lot about our customers. Let's talk. I attended a session in Europe earlier this summer that was all prompt-based composition, no templates, just
Yeah.
prompt-based, have it do the composition. And it's pretty cool. And you start thinking about businesses that have all these disparate systems, and you start thinking, well, there's an opportunity to bring all that goop together and actually get our arms around it.
In a sense that I think that's an ultimate direction, that what we know as batch will disappear and everything will be created, that content on demand. But this is a little way away yet, but it's certainly a future state.
There was some data to suggest that consumers spend more time on essential communications. And the reason I ask is because there is this view, and I did a little mini research project on it, that people are fatigued with digital. They get too much email. They're just exasperated with email. They don't want to deal with it. I'm like, maybe that's true for stuff from the grocery store or somebody you didn't really care. But if it's your bank or your insurance company, you're going to give it its due diligence and time. And your data shows that, at least to some degree.
It shows it with opens, but also we know that it's not quite two, but they go back and re-look at those same communications.
What was my purchase history or balance last month or whatever? Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, absolutely. And was it so it was the amount of time then? There was a factor that was higher?
Yes, I can dig that. I don't have it to mind, but there's certainly, they spend more time. The most critical thing is that twice as many essential emails are open than campaign emails.
Get open, that's number one.
Secondly, we know that they are reopened or reviewed close to twice. And yes, in terms of the time spent looking at them, I know we've got some stats on that. I'd be making it up if I told you, but I know it's surprisingly high.
So is the definition of mail changing? Is the mail just what we call customer communications? I feel there's a connotation that it's printed and shows up in your post box.
Mail in the traditional sense, as I said, is no longer relevant. So when one talks about mail today, and certainly in our geography, you're talking about email and customer communications across multiple channels. So it morphed into a wider definition.
One of the things that really fascinates me about email is how do consumers determine what's real and authentic and what's not? It seems to me there's certain patterns that people might use to make that determination, but what is it your sense that people are looking at when they're saying, oh, this is really what I think it is?
So this whole idea of being a trusted sender. So the large senders in New Zealand are super focused on ensuring that through the relationship with ourselves and then ultimate through to the email box providers that the emails are being authenticated. But from a receiver point of view, from a customer point of view, look, there are serious issues around what's coming into inboxes. And I know the telcos, the inbox providers are spending a lot of money providing layers of security around and trying to stop spam and bad people. It's a real issue. And one has to be on guard continuously. Government and the banks and other large enterprises are spending a lot of time trying to market to consumers around being safe and checking URLs and checking. But it's getting worse. It's not getting better, that's for sure. So it's the inbox is a dangerous place. It's an issue for the receivers, not the senders. The senders will claim that they're doing everything they can to ensure that their emails are secure. From a sender perspective, what we believe is critical is having access to deep logs. And so that's what we provide to our customers, our sending customers. And we've got lots of stories around how we've been able to surface up that content really fast to resolve issues that have appeared. We've been able to deal with that because we've been able to get that access, which is critical.
Drupal last year on the first day, the big news was Canon was partnering with Heidelberg. And for me, being on the first day, it was pack your bag, go home. That's all you need to know. The center of the universe of the printing industry just left Germany and it went to Japan, right? It's in Japan now, or maybe even China, or maybe Asia Pacific. My question for you is, you've been around long enough, are we seeing that same shift in the CCM industry? Meaning it used to be Northern Europe, the Netherlands and just Europe in general, really owned the CCM vendor space and innovation coming out of that print legacy. This is the 6th phone call I've had with Asia Pacific in the last week.
Yeah.
With you.
Yeah.
It seems to me the center of the universe, the center of intellectual capital, of knowledge and expertise, and implementing some of these CCM, modern CXM solutions, and the companies that are really driving innovation like Cumula 9, it's still in Europe, but it seems like the brain trust has moved to Asia Pacific.
You see, large organizations, and if we talk about Europe, and
Right.
who may have got there first, are now tied in legacy. And so I think we've got the probably more nimble, and so we can move faster. And certainly in Asia, they've certainly got scale, but I think they understand now that the advantages of moving to these modern platforms, and they may not be burdened with the same legacy that Europe and North America have.
That's a great way to look at it. The integration firms coming out of India in particular, right?
Yes.
And many talented individuals that know a lot about the space and are building a huge pile of intellectual capital around CCM.
There are pockets everywhere where
Right.
organizations are doing some pretty cool things. But look, I spend my life running around large organizations who have got the exact same problems that everyone else has got, which is prioritizing, cleaning data. They've got a CRM. They're rolling out Salesforce Marketing Cloud. They're trying to organize a whole bunch of other things, and so the customer comms piece just gets tacked into on the end of these other large automation projects, replacing core platforms. So most of the banks in New Zealand and the utilities are all doing core system replacements. They're massive tasks that are taking years to roll out. And the CCM piece tends to just be on the periphery, and we'll get to that later sort of discussion.
Yeah, and that's where that whole conversation about customer experience comes in and who drives that and all that stuff.
That's where those insights, those email insights that we had done, that what we identified there was the sense that the whole center of the ecosystem was their CRM and their campaign automation platforms, and that would drive all communications in the future. In fact, in some organizations, it's being mandated as the single platform to use for all communications, and that we think that's a huge mistake.
Really? Why is that? I'm just
because they're built around just pushing content out and not around deliverability. So we think that those essential communications that you actually need to be able to deliver them. And with campaign, it doesn't really matter if 90% of the messages actually get through to inboxes. But if you're sending a disconnection notice out to someone, you need to make certain it gets through.
So is your client base just New Zealand or Australia?
I've got some in Australia as well, yeah. So it's across both regions. And we're working in Asia, but primarily in that market, it's e-invoicing. So working with third parties around enabling e-invoicing, which is being mandated in those Asian countries by government.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's come into Europe too. I just got to notice, is it Belgium?
Yeah.
In Europe, it's business to business, right?
Yes.
It's always fun to talk to you. As you do more work and discover things, let me know. If you get to the US, let me know. And I'm sure we'll be talking.
Thanks, Andy. Cheers, mate.